timing. So this is Ian Spence's presentation, and unfortunately he couldn't come, so I agreed to help. First, the talk is about practices and methods, which are there to realize the SEMAT vision. One is we want practice independence. We the people, we hold the truths to be self-evident. Basically, without reading all this, it's about having practices separate and not being burdened by the whole methodology. So usually practices are not separate. You cannot take them and reuse them. They are not reusable elements. They are, when you compose them, everything can change because the developer of a methodology thinks he knows better than the original developer. That's how it works in general. We don't. We also talk about no more wars in method. I've heard that many times. It continues over and over again. It's almost a little silly how we, if you think about the different methods available, they are not so much different, but they are treated very different because they change terminology. And one author may be a better speaker than others, may be able to sell his stuff better than others. Just now we have a little fight between methods such as SAFE, extremely popular, DAD, and LESS, just to take 3 examples. And it is it's a little bit ridiculous because they have so much in common. Well, if an intelligent user would like to have a little from here, a little from there, and that's exactly what we want to get to. We don't want to have branded methodologies. We also want the better software development. We don't want to only accept that we can get good and cheap, but not fast. And so on. We want them all. And you know, there is, we have this better, faster, cheaper, happier metrics. And we can, thanks to the Essence kernel and the different dimensions, we can progress all of these aspects at a time and make it so you get it all in an organized way. We want better teams. Thanks to Essence and its points, you can have a very nice conversation in the team, so the team will learn how to reason about what are the good things. You gather the team around Essence. So this is now the future, but the thing is, the future is here. It's here today. Just grab it. So now Ian wants to introduce the IJI Essentials. IJI stands for my company, and we have been developing practices for 10 years now. We have had to adopt them to every new version of a kernel, the Essence. We had a kernel before, we made a standard, and we had practices described on that kernel. But we have adapted them now to this new standard that was taken in June last year. So what you can do, the idea is that we capture the essence of what everyone does when you develop. And the essence is a small process, very small process, that captures the common ground. That is the basis for all your work. It is a sat-nav for your project. You can follow where to go. You know where you are and where you want to go. It checks progress and health, and it brings teams together to collaborate. So it is a foundation for methods. To realize the vision, we need practices. And practice, at the bottom we have a kernel, and on top of the kernel we can add practices. Kernel works in that sense just as a vocabulary, but it also adds more to it. Kernel is not just a static thing, it has this state, so you can measure progress. And you have several layers here. The kernel is the common ground. Every project in software would say, we use this, we need this. And on top of it, we first have a set of generic practices, practices that are useful for basically anything you do. Then we add on top of that domain-specific practices, and at the very top, we have a local practice that people can add. So let's look at generic practices. We have developed a number of starter packs. This is Agile Essential practice, contains 7 practices that are good for any team that want to go Agile. Start light, easy, and learn more and more. We have a set of practices from Unified Process. Basically, we could identify 7 practices that we could keep separate and take one or the other. There's still a lot of companies using RAP out there. And for them, being able to move Agile is easier if they understand what the essence is, what are the practices, the essence of the practices. Instead of 3,000 pages, you get a few cards. And then we have a set of practices here which are for scaling. Basically, these practices, Agile at scale, 10 practices are the essence of SAFe. So, and I'll show you, just to get an idea. I take them all. These are, so here is the kernel. This is the kernel. And so you understand they look like code I can open, but since I have limited time, I don't want to spend time on it. There's a kernel, Agile at scale. No, Agile Essentials. It's a little thinner. This is Agile at scale. It's a little thicker. So here, but still, compare with what you see otherwise. Look at all the documentation that we had on RAP. RAP is about the same. And here is something new, is continuous flow. And so we have developed now, of course, this is not the same. This is the essence. This is what you should know. And then you can participate in discussions and work. There's no doubt there was a lot of knowledge in both, in these bigger books. But you can reference these books for details. We also have a use case 2.0. It's a new use cases. Okay. We have a user story, Essentials. It's a thin set of cards, like this one. And we have Scrum Essentials. Scrum is also described in this way. It's also a few set of cards. It's very easy to understand and to work with. And then you can The wonderful thing is you can compose them. So here is these new cards. They have gone through some generations, the cards. So now, and they're still OMG standard. So this is the new card for use case, to describe a practice. Here are the two alphas in that practice, use case and use case slice. Use case slice is a new concept in use cases. And we have narratives and so on. So it's moving forward with smaller improvements, but still it's basically similar ideas we have had for 5-6 years. Okay, we also have these in a tool. So we have a tool practice workbench. It's one of the tools where we can work with practices. Here we have use case essentials. This is the first thing you see if you want to go to use cases. And then you have more and more details. So I'm not going to take the time here now, but we're happy to show you later. So we have a practice when it's composed too with other practices. And there is more information. So all this that is generated from the tool. And more, tools can be quite extensive, and that is the beauty of it too. We have what is this? It is a checklist, the full checklist for use cases, and also more guidance for how to work with use cases are all there. So it's not only the cards. The cards is the essentials. Then on top of that, added more and more structured information. Here we have an example of how you work with it. This comes from Munich Re. I hope it's an up-to-date slide. Otherwise, Burkhard will correct it later. So you can work with a pool of practices, and then from that pool of practices, you create a starter pack, which is something you can have to set up different methods, if I say so. And from that starter pack, you create a method that is specific. For instance, this is an individual team's way of working, so they can use it. And to do that, they can take practices from the pool of practices, or they create themselves. So in this way, you can mix and match practices. You have a kernel, and the kernel has around it can be used for different methods. So here are 3 different teams having 3 different methods using but the same kernel. Here's another company, Rule Financial. Okay, so I stay. This is another company that has benefited a lot from having this practice-based approach. So they created 7 different methods, and they could easily add new practices. That's one of the beauties. It's so hard to change existing methods because you don't really know what impact a change has. But here, with limited change to one practice at a time, usually we'll make it easier to make changes. Another slide from Munich Re about what kind of practice you have. You don't only have, at the bottom here, you have more traditional practices like use case essentials, architecture essentials, component essentials. And in this case, Munich Re has their own test management practice, and they have added project management for iterative projects on the top there. They have their own unified process and own funding. So it is very flexible, and they are able to put together very specific methods for any particular project. It's a world of practices, and it's not standing still. Whatever methodology we create today, we know, hopefully, that we have learned something tomorrow, and that we want something new. The kernel is the great enabler, because it actually bands together practices. So you have the same common ground when you talk about more specific things. Specific things that can be generic for many projects, or domain specific. Practice is the great communicator. With the practices, gather the team around them, and they are small enough, small so people can understand them quite quickly and get involved in working with them much quicker than we could do in the past. We didn't have anything like this in the 90s when people worked with methods. We always are looking for the big picture. But I would say now we are in the essentialism era. We look for the essentials, not only in software, but in basically anything we do. Start with the essentials. And there are so many competition out there. It's a world where dogs eat dogs, and we have to be up to date and to be able to change our behavior as we can do things better. So our essentials will help team to get started quickly. Start from the kernel, add a set of practices. All these practices, the practice packs we have, can be reused in any combination to create your method, your own method. And that is something we have never ever been able to do in the past. So, that's all thanks to Essence, the new OG standard. Thank you.